Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Lunch Update, our program that helps you stay curious, connected, informed, live, and in real time. This conversation, like all Lunch Update programs, are made possible by our presenting sponsor, Perkins Coie, and our Accelerate sponsor, Baker Tilly. As we always do, we record these and we post them online for you to be able to revisit, to share, and usually give us a little bit into the afternoon, and we'll have it up for you. Coming up, we'll be joined by two leaders, one national, one regional, to discuss workforce development trends and opportunities. But first, here are some chamber updates. We invite you to join us at the Wisconsin Institutes of Discovery for our State of the Sectors event on Tuesday, December 7th from 8 to 10 a.m. This event will bring together national voices and local experts to assess Greater Madison's economic standing and competitive positioning in key innovation industries. We are excited to welcome Kara Sanders, who's the managing editor of Livability, to Madison for this program. If you're not aware, Livability, which is the foremost expert on best places to live and what that means, and increasingly becoming the expert on what remote work might look like and what places will benefit from remote work. They're the managing editor of Livability. Kara Sanders will be joining us live in Madison as well to talk about what they're seeing in the data, specifically around Madison just being ranked the best place to live in the United States. We'll have other panelists that will join us that will highlight recent trends and analyze the latest regional business data, including findings from our soon-to-be released fall business survey that we did in conjunction with area chambers and business membership organizations. Those partners include Destination Madison, DMI, the Latino Chamber, the Madison Black Chamber, the DeForest Windsor Area Chamber of Commerce, the Fitchburg Chamber and Visitors Bureau, the Middleton Chamber of Commerce, and the Verona Area Chamber of Commerce. I'd like to thank our presenting sponsor for that event, the State of the Sectors, University Research Park, and Charter Communications, who's our Accelerate sponsor for that. And you can register now by going to our website at madisonbiz.com. And on the purely fun side, not that State of the Sectors wouldn't be fun, but on the purely fun side, you can also join us on Wednesday, December 8th from 4 to 6 p.m. So an evening event called Big Night Out. The event is free for chamber members, and this one will take place at the Capitol Ice Arena, which is the home of the Madison Capitals hockey team. We look forward to welcoming you to the Capitals Eagle Nest, where we'll have drinks and plenty of networking opportunities. But you will be able to show off your ice skating skills with an open skate from 4 to 4:30. Many thanks to our presenting sponsor for that event, Catalent. Again, you can register at madisonbiz.com. The first of our two guests today is Adrienne Ross. Adrienne is the U.S. Department of Homeland Security Morale, Welfare, Recreation Coordinator for Operation Allies Welcome to Fort McCoy. She has served in the Homeland Security Agency for 11 years, including the past 5 years as the Senior Program Manager. Her background includes senior IT and safety roles in Virginia with Evoke Technologies and others, as well as a stint as a Senior Safety and Health Specialist for the U.S. Department of Commerce. So welcome, Adrienne. Thank you for joining us.
Oh, thank you for having me. We so appreciate what you guys are doing and what you always do, and that we have an opportunity to share what we're doing here and how maybe we can make community connections.
Great. I will tell for the viewers that are on video.
So one thing we have is okay.
Sorry, Adrienne. I was just going to say for the viewers that are on video, the Adrienne's military computer would not let her log in on Zoom, and so she's coming to us via audio. But let me start there. I think this is where you were headed anyway. But Adrienne, tell us right now what life is like at Fort McCoy. I mean, how many of our Afghan ally guests are there? What's the lay of the land at Fort McCoy right now?
Well, lay of the land right now is we have a little over 10,000 Afghan guests who are still here at Fort McCoy. There are 82,000 across the country. 49,000 of those individuals are currently at DoD installations in the United States across several sites, and more than 20,000 have actually been relocated from 8 of our safe havens throughout the United States to their new communities. Right now, we are resettling by we're trying to resettle an additional 2,000 more by the beginning of December. So every month we have Afghan guests who make it through our resettlement process. They have sponsorship in the communities that they are going to. They have housing available in the communities they are going to, and they have also sponsorship for employment. So before a guest is resettled through the program, we make sure that they're in our system and that they also have been given all the vetting and screening that they need to start a new life here in America.
You know, I'm curious how many of the ones that are so the guests that are here and maybe those that are elsewhere in the country in that 80,000+, how many are planning to stay in Wisconsin? Is that something that's tracked?
It is tracked, but how it's tracked basically is once we receive an invitation back from the sponsors saying we have space, jobs, housing, and a community that can support them, that's how they are resettled. So they end up being resettled across America for those communities that can provide that type of sponsorship and available resources. So even here in Wisconsin, we have the Winona Afghan Support Network that's going to be joining our work here to get them to, hey, think about Wisconsin, not that some have not already. We've had some what they call self-departures, and those are individuals who have family here in America already. They have a connection and are like, hey, I don't need to wait through the process. I'd like to go and be with my family. And so those are different than those who wait for us to vet them through sponsorship, basically for employment and housing. So we have self-departures like that, and then we have sponsored departures. So I don't have that number on me right now. That number changes daily, but I can provide that later for you and send you an email with what are this week's numbers for those that may be settling here in Wisconsin. Once they get through a process and we tell them they get to a departure briefing, it's within 72 hours from that departure briefing that they will then be resettled through these sponsored communities. And so I'll have that information. Great.
I take it from what you're saying is, do families still need sponsorship? Are there those that are unsponsored that are currently at Fort McCoy?
Yes.
And what does that process entail for someone who wanted to be a sponsor? Is that could a business sponsor or an individual sponsor? Does it require family? I mean, what are the preconditions for considering being a sponsor?
It's called a resettlement sponsorship, and that's something that is vetted through the Department of Homeland Security and also through the immigration part of Department of Homeland Security. And we do have a resettlement person. They were unable, I invited them to the meeting, but they were unable to make today's meeting. It was just too short notice. They had other conflicts, but I will definitely get you some additional information specifically on how individuals can sponsor some of our guests.
And what does that process look like? I mean, from a just a practical standpoint, is it a month, couple months thing, a few weeks? How long does something like that usually take?
For sponsorship, they're vetting for being a part of communities, being a part of America. So Social Security card, a green card, so they can work here in America. And so they have to be vetted through the immigration process to see whether or not they're actually going to be what we call our special immigrant visas. For individuals like that, that's about 40% of the Afghans that have come to America are eligible for special immigration status and visas. And that's because they took significant risks to support America while we were in Afghan. So those individuals, they get through the process a lot quicker, and they also have special visas, and they're in the pipeline already. Additionally, others worked, like they may have been doctors and lawyers and dentists and journalists and human rights activists and attorneys, and a lot of them are educated. a lot of these special immigrant visas are educated people who came from another country. We've already been able to provide some students that came as well, scholarships. Universities have given them scholarships because they are already doctors, nurses, lawyers, professionals, and now they just need their US credentials.
So what do you want businesses? I know, there's a lot of moving pieces, but one of the things specifically you're doing is reaching out to businesses. What is it that you want businesses to know about the process and the opportunity?
Well, the community connection portion of what I do is basically, let's connect and try to help these Afghan refugees come in and learn what it is to be an American citizen. So we're having different community connections to try and get that cultural orientation to the American way of life here in the States. For example, we plan on doing many events, some special events like resume writing, mock interviews, employer workshops, just to let them know that here in America, this is how we work. This is our work ethic. Excuse me, technical skill development. So maybe they were a truck driver in Afghan. Well, here we have CDL requirements. So they need to know what those are. So we need businesses to come in and tell us what those requirements are so they can be really just a productive for themselves and for the community, a great part of the community. We also want to try and give them some real estate basics. For example, they'll be sponsored from some as little as 30 days because they already have jobs they've been offered. So they don't need as much help as others. Some will be sponsored for 3 months, 90 days, because they don't have all the resources that others have or the education. So they need to know in real estate, you may need 2 months to move in to rent an apartment or a home. You may need 3 months to rent an apartment or home. Credit reporting. How does that work here in America? Because they are given Social Security numbers. So because you're getting a Social Security, you will pay Social Security tax. All of these things for financial literacy, to be able to ingrain themselves in our community and actually succeed in our community. So that's some of the things we're hoping that some of the events we want to put on, an artist connection where people come in and they actually just show their talents. It's morale, welfare / wellness and recreation. So we don't want to just we already have a school here we have a school superintendent, a deputy school superintendent that has created all these learning centers to teach people ESL, English as a second language. For those, some speak English very well. They've actually come back and forth to the United States as a part of their job duties in Afghan. But we also want to connect them with concerts. We want to have a winter fest. We want to do free haircuts, free salon day, cooking demonstrations. Maybe some of the restaurants can say, hey, we'll bring in some free samplings, like Costco type samplings. And because there's too many people here to feed the entire community, but we can do sampling and say, hey, here's the American cuisine. Let us show you some of that. And let's teach you some of that. Let's teach you what it is to be a part of a live televised event for the Super Bowl, tournaments, all types of things that will allow our guests to understand that they are connected to the community. And these are the ways in America we connect with our community. So that's the recreational / morale. But for many of the Afghans, I had a meeting this morning. Many of the Afghans do not know what it is to live here, period. Right. What does it mean to live in America? And we have legal classes as well to let them know you need to know what your rights are. You also need to know we have a lot of laws, and state by state, those laws may change. So they're being oriented and given that information as well. But a lot still don't understand. That's why what I do is for the entire community.
Right.
And we have 2 communities here. We have a North community and a South community.
But that's just a term, a phrase for where they're at Fort McCoy, or is that the geography of Afghanistan?
It's a little bit of both.
Okay.
Because there's so many people here. We literally stood up a small city right here on Fort McCoy. So it's kind of like the north side of town, the south side of town. They both get the same thing here, but we had to do that just to manage the resources and the needs of the guests here. And we call them guests.
Right. So for businesses that are interested in doing what you talked about, talking about opportunities, talking about what are the pathways to those opportunities, after this later today, we're going to send out an email to 5,000 or 6,000 email addresses, just kind of recapturing what we talked about. But, is there a place where they could go to begin the process? Is there an email or a website? What do they need to do to start the process of just an inquiry into what they could do to be helpful and to possibly even hire somebody?
Absolutely. I'm going to send you a link that anyone can go to, and this is the information that is released to the public. And you can go to that website and find out all this additional information as to the living conditions, the vetting process. Is it going to be secure? Because they are being vetted. All have been vetted security-wise to make sure there's no one that's going to harm anybody or hurt anybody that made it to America. And so that's all done, and that's all public knowledge. So I'm going to send you the dhs.gov website that can go out to the entire to your entire group, so that people understand what is the process of this, what's happening, what is Homeland Security doing to make sure that as they acclimate to their communities, that even the communities have information. Right.
As you look at sorry, Adrienne, go ahead.
No, go right ahead.
As you look at the specific types of employment, I know you said there are some professional, highly educated. I'm sure there's just as would be with any community, there's just a myriad of skills. But as you think about it, kind of writ large, are there specific types of employers that you're more interested in, that you think if we could have access to these types of employers, we think that a good piece of the population of these guests, of these future residents of hopefully our community, are there certain types of businesses or industries that you would like us to target, or people would you'd like them to know more about this process?
Oh, absolutely. And it is varied here. So I can begin to put some information out, and we have points of contact for each of our communities, the North and the South, that can get the information out and then come back. And we're just now able at this point, as they've gone through the process, learning, okay, your skill set is this. Has that been tracked completely? I am not certain. I will find out if it has been or not. Okay. But it's been mostly conversation, and also as some are actually not literate, even in their own language. Right. So they speak their own language, but they cannot read or write their own language. And now they're trying to learn a new language without even the basic skills of their old language. Right. So we have individuals, but they are also skilled. So it's a lot of high, low, and in between, trying to find a way. That's why I'm trying to, trying to develop their knowledge of the employment here in America through employer workshops. So if a larger company wants to come in, say you have Amazon wants to come in and say, hey, we always need truck drivers, but you need to know this, this, and this, and that. So then now that community they go to and resettle knows that we're going to need to help them get to that level so that they can take that job. Right. And we need employers to really help with that type of things. And I'd love to we're thinking of doing an employer workshop. We can't yet do a job fair because we don't know where they're being resettled each time. Yep. But we can come in and say, hey, they can ask, hey, I want to stay here in Madison. I want to stay here in La Crosse. I want to stay in Wisconsin. And so, because the employer came to the workshop, and guess what? I think I would fit with that company. So I want to give the opportunity for people to come in and say, hey, you can come, you can fit in our community. And here is where you can fit in our community.
Right.
They haven't heard that from the outside world.
Well, let us know. I mean, obviously, we'd be very interested in helping you connect to local employers. I'm wondering, to just transition away from employment for a second, what else do you need from the communities? I mean, there's clothing, housing, books. What are there other things that, as you look around the community on base, are there things that we should be thinking about as a community to, start to send that signal that if you're going to make a decision about housing and about where you set your life, we would love you to consider Madison. Are there things that we can be doing as a community to contribute and be helpful?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Anything you can send that I can get that information out to the community would be fabulous. That way they know, even if they get through the process and say, hey, I've decided to stay here in Wisconsin, is that okay? And I want my green card and I want my housing and all of that availability. We just need to know what is available so that we can push that information up and let people know, push it up and out to let people know it is available.
So final question. So a personal question. So, you've relocated too for this, right? You've taken an assignment at Fort McCoy, from your role at the Department of Homeland Security. I'm curious as you've gone through this process, and maybe even just thinking about the pandemic as a whole, what have you learned about yourself during this moment? Are there insights that you personally have that you would love to share with leaders on the call?
Absolutely. One would be, as communities here in America, we have 12 years in school to learn and grow. These individuals won't even have 12 months. Some won't even have as much as 12 weeks of learning and growing. So I've learned now that we are such a diverse country, and the gratefulness is what I try to give to the guest here. We are a grateful nation. We are a very caring nation. The community here in Wisconsin has responded. We still need many donations. There are still individuals that have a need here. They can't house a whole lot of things because this is temporary housing, but there's such a great need here, and we still need lots of donations for items, for coats, for boots that are appropriate for Wisconsin. If they are here till March, the coats may have come from Georgia. Well, here in Wisconsin, that my family's from the Midwest, that is going to be frostbite. And we also want to do some outdoor events. So we want them to know about that. Just because it's cold doesn't mean you have to stay inside. But we don't have the weather gear here that's being donated. So there is a place to donate, and I'll send that information as well, to donate so that these individuals will say, hey, I think I'm gonna like Wisconsin. I've enjoyed being here myself because the guests don't yet have the freedom to roam Wisconsin. They don't have the freedom to leave the base yet until they've been processed or they decide, I just want to self-depart. They don't leave the base. And so our freedom in this United States of America is what we're trying to instill in them. And it has made me more and more grateful to be an American. I know it sounds cheesy, but it is legitimate when you see the plight of these individuals who are confused. They've come from a war-torn organization, and I'm ex-military as well, where these third world countries don't have the infrastructure we have. They don't understand the freedoms we have. Yes, you may start out at this place, but guess what? You have an opportunity to be and do whatever it is you have chosen with making the right choices. Let's give you some choices. I will leave with that.
Yeah.
We Americans have unlimited choices for our lives.
Well,
I
appreciate
am grateful.
Well, I mean, what a great way to, it's freedom and gratitude and opportunity. We're thankful that you have taken the assignment and that you are here in the state and helping, and anything that you can send us, just know that we are interested, not just as an organization, as a business community, but as a larger community in Greater Madison. There's a lot of opportunity in this, developing here, and we would love to share that with our friends and allies from Afghanistan. And so whatever you send to us, we will make sure to get it out to those that are on the call, and just stay in touch with us and let us know how we can be helpful.
Absolutely. Thank you so very much.
All right. Have a great day. Appreciate you.
You too. Bye-bye.
All right. Our next guest is Seth Lentz. Seth was appointed the CEO of the the Workforce Development Board of South Central Wisconsin in May of 2019, after serving for 14 years before that as the deputy director. After graduating from UW-La Crosse, he began his career in workforce program operations at the Southwest Workforce Development Board in 1998. His volunteer experience includes having served on the boards and committee of the United Way of Dane County, the Northside Early Childhood Zone, and the Janesville Literacy Council. So, Seth, thanks for joining us today. Appreciate it. Good to see you.
Yeah, good to see you. Thanks for having me.
How's life?
It's ever changing.
That's right.
Continuing to evolve.
Yeah. You just heard Adrienne from Homeland Security talking about Operation Allies, Welcome Home. You are very much you and I talk about this sometimes, where it's one coin, but the business community is very much on the demand side. Where talent will go, you're very much on that supply side, right? Trying to create the opportunities. What do you see as opportunities for these potential new residents, for these allies that are now beginning this process? As you think about it, what do you see opportunities from a workforce standpoint?
Well, I think, she spoke to it. They're coming to a community that I think is very used to and has experience in welcoming individuals relocating and resettling. So I also think that there's going to be an immense opportunity for them to be able to capitalize on their previous experiences, skills, abilities. We've gained some experience now in how do we give credit for that prior learning? How do we, give that context? How can we bridge those gaps? So for those that do have education, I think that we're going to be well positioned to capitalize on that. For those that don't, we also know that we've got pretty solid infrastructures within our community partners in helping those that may not have the literacy or the technical skills or the hard skills. And so I think that we have a network of community partners as well as education. And right now we've got business and industry that is also at a place where they're used to bringing individuals into their operations, celebrating that diversity, finding ways to mentor and help incorporate not only into a new community, but also into their company community and culture. So, I do think that there are some great opportunities that have come out of either this pandemic experience, but also just our community in general has experience. And I think that, they're gonna find a welcoming community that is aligning resources to prepare to receive them and support them to resettle.
That's great. And it sounds like there's some movement at the state level too, to put Wisconsin firmly on the map for these new potential residents of Wisconsin.
Yeah, so I do know that the various department secretaries at the state level have been working on those that will be resettling to the different regions, and they are planning to engage with the workforce development boards as well as the other government entities and fund sources to bring and align those resources. So to, I think, your question about, well, what do we know about the skills, abilities, and the sheer numbers that would be coming? Hopefully we'll be learning about that so that we can, again, position and be prepared to offer some of those strategies and services that she referenced in regards to how do we get them in front of appropriate employers? How can we expose them to community events and educational opportunities and help to, really bring them up to speed about what it's like to be here and welcome them.
Yeah. Let's talk quickly about the Workforce Development Board. I don't know that everybody on the call knows what you do. So quickly, just talk a little bit about how you sit between the public and the private sector, and really why you exist. What's the work that you do, so people understand who is this person, who is Seth Lentz, the CEO of the Workforce Development Board. Tell us a little bit about what the organization does.
Sure. So the Workforce Development Board, we are a private nonprofit organization, but we're really put in place by a piece of legislation that is targeted at taking federal employment and training resources and driving those down to a local level to help prepare a workforce that's responsive to the business and industry needs in a region. There are 11 of workforce development boards in the state. We're one of them in the South Central area. We have 6 counties, Dane County being our largest. We go up north to Sauk, Columbia, and Marquette, and then we have Jefferson and Dodge as well as part of our region. We, again, administer and deliver employment and training resources and services. So working with our business and industry to understand what the needs are. Then our challenge, if you will, is to work with community partners to develop training, strategies, supports, wrap around, and integrate those service deliveries to help bring workers to meet the employer demand so that we can have a thriving community and economy.
Right. One of the other things you guys do is you have access to a lot of data around the workforce. And I've seen some of the data that you and I've discussed where, by sector, you're able to measure, what positions are open, how long does it take to fill that position, what's the intensity of the search. I'm curious, is there anything you can share, or any interesting insights that have developed from some of that data about, we all know there's a labor gap in this moment. We're all feeling it. You and I've talked about it a lot, but what insights are you seeing within that data that, maybe illuminate where we are, where we're headed?
So again, you and I have talked about it over, over the years here. A lot of our data trends are exactly that. They're late in coming. Like the events have to happen for us to get to them. So we're able to look back at some of the other previous, I'll say, employment shuffles, if you will. The recession was one. We learned some things, but you don't learn until years after, and you can actually analyze the data. So we're trying to use some of that. What lessons did we learn? And then look at what we're starting to see. So some of the data that we are starting to see is our labor force is actually back to about its 2019 level. So our labor force is there. Our labor force participation rate is at about 73%, which is pretty high. And we're about back to that level. But the labor, where the labor is and how it's looking is different. That, I think, is the biggest reshuffle that we're seeing. The strategies to attract and retain labor is definitely different as their priorities have shifted. I referenced before when we had the recession, folks took about 24 months. They found some new normals from that disruption. And so I'm anticipating from this experience, people find different experiences and lessons learned from that. And now I think we're starting to see some reshuffle of priorities and balances in what employment looks like, balancing it with life and those priorities. And people are finding some new strategies. Businesses are finding new strategies. to be able to capitalize on talent and attract and retain them. So we are seeing some of the data return back to levels of normalcy, but there are still some really big gaps in some significant industries when it comes to availability for labor. And, we're definitely looking at, when you think of the infrastructure bill, there's going to be a whole lot of work, and those industries are already short. Many of them are already short on labor. Kind of, how are we going to accomplish this now that we have an increased kind of request for labor? And it's going to be skills. It's going to be navigating those skills with the new technologies.
Right. So, I mean, the reason why, so many business leaders have joined the call today is, my guess is, I think one, they're probably curious about the Afghani resettlement. But I also think people want to know how to get more workers. And it's great news that you're telling us, which is we're returning to those, or are at those 2019 pre-pandemic workforce levels, but that where people are in the workforce has completely changed, where people have switched industries, returned to different industries. The reservation wages that they're looking for are different than they were in 2019. But what advice do you have when you talk to employers about how to bridge these gaps that you reference when you are in one of these sectors that is, the data is not just anecdotal, hey, I can't find people, but the data is saying you're going to have a really hard time finding people. What advice do you have for employers as they try to get their businesses back up and running as well?
So one of my recommendations that we share when we are having conversations with business industry right now is really examine and find your flexibility. That's going to be some of your value proposition right now with the labor that's out there. Our traditional job fairs, the virtual job fair, that seems to be the attractiveness seems to be tailoring off. Even doing some in-person job fairs, the participation in those is tailoring off. But when you post and you're offering remote work, we're seeing increased response. So people are still interested in remote work. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean fully remote work. It may mean partially or having the flexibility. So I think for companies, really examining where you have flex points is going to increase your attractiveness to labor. And that's everything from scheduling, either start times, end times, 10-day or 10-hour work days, those sorts of things. Whether they're hybrid schedules, can they have X number of days in the office versus working remote? Locations, full-time or part-time, and then also like your compensations. Right now, I think the other thing that we're hearing is compensation isn't just about salary. It's really allowing flexibility if you have it. What are the priorities, or what's the value to the talent that you're trying to attract? Sometimes we've been hearing that offering flexibility has more value than wages. So we've actually got individuals that are willing to step back because, I can start this job later. I can take my kids to school. Well, again, during this reshuffle, that's been a priority I've put a value on, and that's more valuable than X number of dollars an hour, for example. So we've definitely seen some changes there. The other thing that I would recommend to companies is make sure that you're paying attention to your current workforce. And not just losing sight because you're trying to focus on the attraction, but making sure you're paying attention and you're extending those flexibilities to your current workforce. Because right now, if you're not taking care of your workforce, somebody else is courting them. So I think you and I mentioned earlier, you can't just be playing offense. You've got to be playing some defense as well.
So last question as we wrap up here. I'm curious about, this had to be, you started off by saying every day's interesting, every day's different. I can only imagine as difficult it was on our end of the pandemic, I can only imagine what it was like to, watch the reshuffling of labor in front of you and then trying to sort out how do you put all that back together in a way that stands up an economy again. I'm curious though, in the process of the pandemic, what you learned about yourself, leadership or anything else, any other insights that you learned about yourself during the pandemic?
I learned about myself. I've gained an appreciation for patience, both to slow down and make sure that I am listening, because there are so many different perspectives and that I can learn from every perspective. May not agree with all of them, but I can learn from them. And again, we all come with these different experiences, which is the diversity that we celebrate, and gaining an appreciation to slow down and pay attention and listen to that, because we are in an innovative place that we've never been before. And it's going to take the collection of all of these experiences and perspectives for us to find these innovative, creative solutions as we evolve to the next level, whatever that is.
The next new normal, right?
Yeah.
Well, good. I appreciate you. Thanks for joining us today, Seth Lentz from the Workforce Development Board. Our thanks to Adrienne Ross from the Department of Homeland Security. I'd also like to thank all of you for joining us, our presenting sponsors, Perkins Coie, our Accelerate sponsor, Baker Tilly. I hope all of you have a great rest of your day. Happy holidays. Next lunch update will be December 2nd. And our guest will be the Wisconsin DOA Secretary, Department of Administration Secretary, Joel Brennan. So until then, be well and do good. Take care.